On a night when winter pressed against the city like a silent, icy hand, an Army veteran and his loyal German shepherd walked toward the glow of a small convenience store. Snow dusted their shoulders, their breath drifted like faint smoke in the freezing air. Just outside the door, beneath the flickering streetlight and beside an old vending machine, a little girl sat curled on a plastic bench, too small for the storm around her, too still for a child her age. Her hands clutched a torn note. Her eyes held fear she could no longer name. Shadow, the veteran's German shepherd, stopped first. Ears raised, nose pointed toward her, as if sensing a story hidden beneath the cold. When the veteran knelt down, the girl finally looked up, her voice trembling like the wind itself. "Sir, my mommy disappeared after her blind date." And in that single moment, with snow falling between them like broken pieces of light, the quiet night became the opening scene of something far darker, something neither man nor dog could walk away from. Before the story continues, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? We have viewers from all over the world, and it means so much to see this community grow. Night pressed over the city beneath a heavy winter storm, snow sweeping across the streets like white sand dragged by an unseen tide. Ethan Ward, a 45-year-old U.S. Army veteran with a square jaw, coarse dark stubble, and eyes that carried both discipline and exhaustion, pushed open the glass door of the convenience store with his gloved hand. He had the rugged build of a man who had spent half his life in harsh climates. Broad shoulders, scar along his left brow earned in Kandahar, a posture always half alert even in civilian life. His expression rarely softened these days. Years in the military and months working long shifts at an auto garage had carved seriousness into his face. But beneath it lived a tired warmth he reserved for moments when life briefly allowed him to breathe. Beside him trotted Shadow, his 7-year-old German shepherd, a large sable-fur dog with a thick winter coat and steady amber eyes. Shadow had served with Ethan during his final deployment, trained for search and rescue, and though retired now, the dog still carried himself with precise discipline, ears rotating, paws placing carefully, body always ready to react. If Ethan was the broken half of a once sharpened blade, Shadow was the piece that kept him from falling apart entirely. Ethan stepped outside with a bag of medicine, canned soup, and a pack of heat pads. The wind slapped against his face as soon as the door swung shut behind him. He squinted at the swirling white, muttering, "Hell of a night." Shadow responded with a low, cautious whine, nose lifted toward the drifting snow. The storm looked like it wanted to swallow the city whole. Street lights blurred into halos, traffic vanished, and every sound felt cushioned under several inches of fresh powder. They made it halfway across the parking lot before Shadow stopped abruptly. The dog's body stiffened, fur lifting slightly along his spine. Ethan followed the line of Shadow's gaze and saw a small shape curled beside the humming vending machine near the far wall. A child. Alone. She sat with her knees pulled to her chest, thin arms wrapped tightly around them, wearing a pink coat too small for the cold, battered snow boots patched with duct tape, and mismatched mittens that looked soaked through. Her hair, dark brown, tangled, fell over her cheeks, which were red from windburn. She couldn't have been older than 5. Ethan felt a cold weight settle in his chest, a familiar ache. The same one he felt whenever he remembered the civilians he couldn't save overseas. His boots crunched through the snow as he approached slowly, crouching down so he wouldn't loom over her. "Hey there, sweetheart," he said gently, voice softened, despite the rough gravel in it. "Are you hurt? Where are your parents?" The little girl looked up, and Ethan's breath caught. Her eyes, big, round, and brown, were glazed with tears that had frozen at the edges. She stared at him as if unsure whether he was real, or just another shadow in the storm. Her lips trembled when she spoke. "Sir, my mommy disappeared after her blind date." Ethan felt the words strike like ice water. Shadow moved closer, lowering his head, tail still, as if offering silent comfort. The girl flinched at first, then reached a small hand to touch the dog's fur, her fingers shaking. "What's your name?" Ethan asked, keeping his tone steady. "June," she whispered. "And where's your mom now?" June shook her head violently, eyes filling again. Instead of answering, she dug into the small backpack clutched to her chest and pulled out a folded piece of paper. The edge was torn unevenly, as if ripped in a hurry. She handed it to him with both hands. Ethan unfolded the note. The handwriting was rushed, uneven, slightly smeared. "If I don't come back in a few minutes, take June to Rosie's diner." His stomach tightened. He had seen messages like this during evacuations, notes written by people who didn't know if they were about to vanish, the kind that carried fear underneath every stroke of ink. "When did your mom write this?" Ethan asked quietly. June sniffed, wiping her nose with her mitten. "She told me to wait inside at our apartment building, but she didn't come back. I looked and looked, and then it started snowing, and then it got dark." Her voice cracked. "I didn't know where to go. Mommy said Rosie's diner is where she would be. But I got scared." Shadow nudged her knee gently with his muzzle, and June leaned into the warmth of the dog's fur like she had known him all her life. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. His mind, sharpened by military training and years of instinctively scanning danger, began piecing the timeline together. A blind date, a hurried note, a disappearance, and a 5-year-old child wandering alone in a blizzard. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. He stood up slowly and extended a hand to her. "June, you did the right thing waiting here. And now you're not alone, okay? I'm Ethan. This is Shadow. We're going to help you." June hesitated only a moment before placing her tiny hand into his. The trust of a child, given so quickly, so desperately, cut deeper into Ethan than he expected. He squeezed gently, promising silently that he would not fail her. He tucked the note into his jacket pocket, feeling the torn edge catch against the fabric, like a warning. "Come on," he said. "First, we get you somewhere warm. Then we're heading to Rosie's diner." Ooh. As they started walking through the swirling snow, Shadow stayed close on June's other side, protective and quiet. The storm howled above them, but Ethan barely heard it. His focus sharpened, mind shifting into the mode he hadn't used since his deployment, the mode reserved for missing persons, for urgent rescues, for nights when the world could turn on a single choice. And tonight, everything began with a torn note and a trembling little girl. The storm had thickened into a white curtain by the time Ethan guided June and Shadow back inside the convenience store. The automatic doors hissed open, letting in a gust of icy air before sealing the trio into a fluorescent-lit room that suddenly felt too bright, too sterile compared to the darkness outside. June clung to Shadow's fur as if it were the only warmth she trusted, and the dog lowered his massive head protectively beside her small shoulder. Ethan approached the counter where the night clerk, a thin, pale young man named Trevor Mullins, looked up from his phone. Trevor couldn't have been more than 22. His narrow face, peppered with patchy stubble, suggested someone who shaved only when he remembered, and his blue eyes had permanent shadows underneath, the kind earned from too many night shifts and too little sleep. He startled slightly at Ethan's approach, then relaxed when he recognized him as a familiar customer. "Rough night, huh?" Trevor murmured. "I need to see your security footage," Ethan replied, voice firm but not unkind. His military tone slipped out too easily, short, direct, a remnant of years giving orders under pressure. "A little girl's mother went missing outside your store tonight." Trevor straightened, shoulders tightening at the seriousness in Ethan's voice. "Oh, yeah, of course, man. Come with me." He led Ethan behind the counter to a small monitor mounted on the wall, its screen divided into grainy security feeds. Shadow stayed behind with June, but his ears pivoted toward every sound, alert as if guarding an invisible perimeter. Ethan watched the footage from 15 minutes earlier. There she was, June's mother. A woman in her early 30s, bundles tight in a dark green coat, hair long and chestnut brown, falling around her shoulders in soft waves. Even in the dim camera quality, Ethan could see tension in her posture. The way she hugged herself, the way her breath puffed in uneven clouds. She stood near the vending machine, phone pinned between her cheek and shoulder as she spoke hurriedly to someone. Her glances over her shoulder weren't random. They were the glances of someone who felt watched. Ethan leaned closer. Then another figure entered the frame. A man. Tall, wearing a heavy charcoal hoodie with the hood pulled low, obscuring most of his face. The shadows hid everything but the rough shape of his jawline and the faint suggestion of stubble. He approached the woman, speaking to her. She stiffened, but didn't run. Instead, she pocketed her phone and took a small, hesitant step toward him. The conversation lasted only seconds. Then the man turned, motioning for her to follow. She did. They walked out of frame together, headed toward the direction of Rosie's diner. But something was wrong. Ethan replayed the moment when she chose to follow the man. There was no panic, no struggle, only a split second of resignation, like someone who hadn't yet decided whether to fear the situation. Trevor frowned, whispering, "Dude, she didn't get in a car. No vehicle pulled up. They left on foot." June tugged Ethan's jacket hem, her voice small beneath the humming ceiling lights. "Is Mommy there? Is she scared?" Ethan crouched so he could look into her eyes. "We're figuring it out, and we're going to follow where she went, okay?" June nodded, but her tiny hands twisted the fabric of Shadow's fur with frightened urgency. Shadow suddenly stiffened, nose snapping toward the entrance. He gave a deep, rumbling growl, not vicious, but warning. Ethan's head jerked in the same direction. The dog walked toward the vending machine area, lowered his nose, and inhaled sharply. His tail stiffened, ears pointed forward, spine rigid. He had caught something. A scent. Ethan joined him outside as snowflakes peppered Shadow's fur. "What is it, boy?" Shadow sniffed the concrete beside the vending machine, the very place June had been sitting. Then he pivoted a few feet to the left, nose dragging low near a set of shallow footprints stamped lightly into the snow, too large for a woman, too heavy for a child. Ethan's pulse kicked up. "Mui hanta," June whispered in Vietnamese-tinged English without realizing her mind had switched languages under fear. Ethan didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. She remembered something, recognized something. He knelt beside her. "Did you smell this man before?" June nodded slowly. "When Mommy was on the phone, a man walked by our building. I smelled his coat. It was like metal and smoke." A cold chill went down Ethan's back, not from the storm, but from the sharpness of her memory. Children often remembered what adults ignored. The wind shifted, and Shadow followed the tracks a few steps more before turning his head toward the street. Ethan placed a firm hand on his back. "Not yet. We go together." He returned inside to thank Trevor. The young clerk rubbed his hands together nervously. "Hey, do you think she's okay?" "She will be," Ethan answered. "We're not stopping until we find her." He stepped out again with June in his arms and Shadow at his side. The city lights flickered through the snowfall, blurry halos over empty streets. Somewhere out there, June's mother had walked into the storm with a stranger. Ethan scanned the road until he found the faint impression of two sets of footprints heading west, the direction of Rosie's diner. "All right," he murmured, tightening his grip on June. "We follow." Shadow barked once, a sharp, decisive sound that cut through the night. The footprints stretched into the storm like a question waiting to be answered. They started walking. And somewhere ahead, a truth was waiting that Ethan wasn't sure he wanted to find. Snow thickened into a restless veil as Ethan carried June through the dimly lit streets, Shadow trotting closely beside them, with each paw landing in silent precision. The storm muffled every sound except the crunch of Ethan's boots and June's soft, shivering breaths. Rosie's diner appeared ahead like a lone ember in the darkness, its neon sign flickering faintly, glowing red against the snow-caked windows. Ethan tightened his hold on June, feeling her small fingers grip the collar of his jacket as if she feared the wind might steal her away. Inside, warmth washed over them instantly. The diner was nearly empty, only a few red vinyl booths, chrome stools at the counter, and the faint smell of frying onions lingering in the air. Behind the counter stood Marla Hensley, the night waitress. Marla was a woman in her mid-40s with broad shoulders, a tired kindness in her moss-green eyes, and streaks of silver in her short auburn hair. She wore a faded blue apron and had the sturdy, no-nonsense posture of someone who had worked far too many double shifts. Her voice, though raspy from years of smoking, held genuine warmth. "Well now," she said as Ethan approached, "you look like you've walked straight out of an avalanche." She wiped her hands on her apron and eyed June with concern. "Everything all right there, sweetheart?" June buried her face into Ethan's chest. Ethan lowered her gently onto a stool and leaned forward. "We're looking for her mother. She was supposed to meet someone here tonight. Did you see her?" Marla frowned thoughtfully and gestured toward the booth closest to the window. "She sat right there about an hour ago. Pretty girl, long dark hair, coat still dusted with snow. She looked nervous, kept tapping her phone, checking the door." Marla's expression softened. "Waited maybe 20 minutes. June peeked up. "Did Mommy smile?" Marla knelt so she could meet June's eyes. "She smiled when she ordered hot chocolate, but she did look worried, honey." Ethan cleared his throat. "What happened after she waited?" Marla stood again, crossed her arms, and looked toward the entrance as if replaying the moment in her mind. "She got a phone call. Short one. After that, she wouldn't sit still. Kept glancing at the door like she expected someone." She paused. Then a man walked in, hood pulled low. I figured he was her date. They talked real quiet for a minute or two. He looked jittery, like someone who hadn't slept in days or had too much on his conscience. Ethan stiffened. Did she seem afraid of him? Marla shook her head. Not afraid. More like conflicted, concerned. But she didn't argue. When he pointed toward the back exit, she followed him. They left through the kitchen hallway. Shadow let out a low rumble, tail rising, head turning toward the diner's back door. Ethan felt the vibration through the floor as the dog shifted his stance. "You smelled something, boy," Ethan whispered. Shadow padded toward the back hallway, nose dragging close to the floor. June slipped off the stool and followed instinctively, placing one hand on Shadow's fur for guidance. Ethan moved beside them, Marla trailing behind. Outside the back door, the wind hit them hard. Snow drifted across the parking lot, but the storm wasn't strong enough to erase the evidence of movement. Ethan spotted the faint outlines of footprints, one set light and hurried, another heavier, longer strides. They both led away from the diner, weaving between parked cars toward the street beyond. "Those are theirs," Ethan murmured. Shadow lowered his head and inhaled deeply. Then he stiffened, turning sharply toward the vending machine near the dumpster. His entire posture sharpened, shoulders taut, ears high, tail rigid. A soft growl pulsed from his chest. Ethan's pulse quickened. "The same scent?" Shadow gave a single bark, confirmation. Ethan felt the pieces shifting into place. The man at the diner was the same one hovering around the convenience store. He had followed June's mother more than once that night. Marla crossed her arms tightly over her chest, her breath visible in the freezing air. "That poor woman," She didn't look like she wanted to go with him, but she didn't say a word. "Did you hear anything they said?" Ethan asked. "Not really." But he kept rubbing his hands together, pacing a little, looked like a man about to confess something or ask for forgiveness. Marla swallowed, or someone who was scared of what might come next. June tugged Ethan's jacket sleeve. "Can Shadow find Mommy?" Ethan knelt before her. "He's trying, June, and he's good at this. Really good." He placed a steady hand over hers. "We're not giving up." Shadow followed the footprints to the very edge of the parking lot where the snow piled deeper. Ethan noticed the tracks wavered, as if the woman hesitated, and then both sets turned sharply south, toward a quieter part of town, toward darkness. The wind howled through the alleyway behind them, scattering flakes over the prints like nature trying to bury the truth before it was found. But Ethan had seen enough missing person cases in the Army to know one thing: fresh tracks meant fresh danger. He stood, lifted June into his arms again, and tightened his scarf as Shadow awaited the next move with unwavering focus. "Marla," Ethan said, "if anyone else comes asking about that woman, don't let them know you talked to us." Marla's brows knitted, but she nodded. "Be careful out there, Ethan. Whoever that man was, he didn't look stable." Ethan exhaled through his nose, steam curling away like smoke. "Yeah," he murmured. "I saw the footage. And he's not just unstable, he's persistent." Shadow barked once, sharp, urgent. The trail was still alive, and they followed it into the storm. The storm had quieted into a steady whisper, the kind that thickened shadows and stretched silence across the old residential block where the footprints led. Street lamps flickered under the weight of ice, casting pale halos over cracked sidewalks and sagging porches. Ethan moved cautiously. June held close to his side while Shadow stayed ahead. Ears pricked, tail rigid, nose slicing the cold air like a blade searching for truth. They reached a narrow lane lined with aging homes, small, box-shaped structures built decades ago when the town was still young. Most were dark, but one had a dim yellow glow leaking from behind thin curtains. The footprints in the snow, still sharp around the edges, led straight to the front steps. Ethan crouched beside June. "Stay behind Shadow. Don't move until I say." June nodded, gripping Shadow's fur for courage. The dog remained steady, his large frame shielding her from the wind, amber eyes fixed on the glowing window ahead. Ethan straightened and climbed the creaking porch steps. He stopped outside the window and peered through a slit in the curtain. Inside, a man paced the room, a wiry, unshaven figure in his early 40s. His dark hair was unevenly cut, strands falling over hollow eyes. His cheeks were gaunt, his posture stiff and defensive. His hands shook, fingers curling and uncurling with restless anxiety. The room behind him was cluttered with old furniture and stacks of newspapers, giving off the feeling of someone who lived pressed against the edge of panic for far too long. But what made Ethan pause was the woman sitting on the sagging couch, June's mother, Marin Ellis. Marin was in her early 30s with long dark hair pulled back loosely, soft brown eyes shaped by exhaustion and strength, and a calm presence that contrasted sharply with the chaos in the room. Her coat had been draped over a chair, and she leaned forward, speaking gently to the pacing man, steadying herself as if she were more concerned for his state than her own. Ethan exhaled, relief mixed with confusion. Whatever this was, it didn't look like an abduction. It looked like a crisis unraveling in slow motion. Shadow growled low, not loud enough to draw attention, but enough to warn Ethan that tension simmered beneath the surface. Ethan stepped back, raised a fist, and knocked firmly. The reaction inside was immediate. The pacing man jerked toward the door, eyes wide with fear, hands trembling violently. Marin rose quickly, palms out. "It's okay," she murmured to the man. "I'll handle it. Stay here, Aaron." Aaron. Ethan filed the name away. The door cracked open just enough for Marin's face to appear. Her expression was a mix of shock, gratitude, and panic. Her voice trembled when she whispered, "Please, don't frighten him. He's not dangerous. He's my brother." Ethan blinked. "Your brother?" Marin nodded quickly and opened the door a bit wider. June, hearing her mother's voice, tried to rush forward, but Ethan gently held her back until Marin stepped fully outside. Marin dropped to her knees in the snow, pulling June into her arms. The relief on her face was so raw, Ethan had to look away for a moment. June clung to her mother as if afraid she might dissolve into the storm again. Inside the doorway, Aaron stood rigid, shoulders hunched, fingers knotting in his sleeves. His appearance up close revealed more detail: deep-set hazel eyes flickering with fear, stubble covering his jawline, and a thin scar on his left temple, old, faded, the kind that hinted at past accidents or emotional collapse. He wore a gray hoodie and wrinkled jeans, clothes that looked slept in. His entire demeanor screamed vulnerability. Marin held June with one arm while she spoke to Ethan. "He saw my profile on the dating app, thought someone might hurt me. He has severe anxiety. Sometimes he spirals, imagines the worst-case scenarios. He didn't force me. He just panicked. I came with him so he wouldn't do something reckless." Ethan nodded slowly, tension easing from his shoulders. He had met soldiers like Aaron, men trapped in endless loops of fear long after leaving whatever had broken them. "All right," he said softly. "No one's here to hurt him." But before Marin could respond, Aaron stepped forward, clutching the doorframe as if it were the only thing holding him upright. His voice was hoarse, as though scraped raw by hours of pacing. "She's not in danger because of me," he said, shaking his head violently. "It's him, the man from the diner, the man she was supposed to meet." Marin turned sharply. "Aaron!" Aaron shook harder, panic rising in his tone. "He's been following you for weeks, Marin. I've seen him, near your work, near your building, at the grocery store. He wasn't your blind date. He pretended to be." He clutched the side of his head. "I tried to warn you. That's why I grabbed you tonight." Ethan felt his stomach twist. Shadow growled again, more insistently this time, picking up the spike of fear crackling in the air. "Are you sure?" Ethan asked, stepping forward. Aaron's voice broke, but his eyes held a desperate clarity. "He's dangerous. I don't know what he wants, but it's not a date. He's been watching her, studying her." Marin's breath hitched. June clutched her mother's coat. Ethan felt the weight of the night shift again. The storm outside seemed suddenly smaller than the danger unraveling right in front of them. And then Aaron whispered the words that froze the air around them. "He's not gone. He'll come back. He always comes back." Snowplow lights cut weak beams across the narrow street as paramedics lifted Aaron onto a stretcher. They were gentle but efficient, their breath forming clouds as they worked. The older of the two, paramedic Lowell, was a broad-shouldered man in his late 50s with deep smile lines and a steady, reassuring voice. He placed a comforting hand on Aaron's shoulder, speaking softly to keep the trembling man anchored. The younger paramedic, Rosa Trent, had sharp brown eyes, warm caramel skin, and her dark curls tucked under a navy beanie. Calm and swift, she wrapped Aaron in a thermal blanket while glancing at Ethan with a look that said she understood crises behind closed doors better than most. The snowplow had carved just enough space in the road for the ambulance to reverse. Its tires crunched over the half-packed drifts. Ethan stood beside Marin and June as they watched Aaron being loaded inside. Marin held June's hand tightly, her posture rigid with exhaustion and worry. Even with wind whipping her hair across her face, she gave her brother a final nod of reassurance, one that told him she wasn't angry, just hurting. Lowell gave Ethan a brief nod. "We're taking him to St. Vincent's. He'll be all right. Panic episode, maybe dissociation, but he's stable." Ethan returned the nod. "Thank you." When the ambulance pulled away, no sirens, just a quiet hum swallowed by snow, the neighborhood fell into an eerie stillness. Shadow pressed against Ethan's leg, ears twitching, as if listening to something the humans couldn't hear. "Let's get inside," Marin whispered. "But not here, not tonight." Ethan agreed instantly. Aaron's house felt exposed, watched. He lifted June into his arms, and together with Marin and Shadow, they followed the plowed road back toward town. The wind had softened, but Ethan couldn't shake the sense that the night was listening. When the neon sign of Rosie's Diner came back into view, Ethan felt a small measure of relief. The diner was warm, visible, familiar, the kind of place strangers didn't linger without being noticed. Marla was still working, her tired eyes widening with relief when she saw their silhouettes through the frosted glass. Inside, Marin guided June into the booth they had sat in earlier. Ethan slipped into the opposite seat, Shadow lying at his feet, tail curled protectively around June's boots. Marin wiped melted snow from her forehead, then took a slow breath as though preparing to reveal something she'd been holding back. "I didn't want to worry June," she said quietly, "but I didn't tell you everything earlier." Ethan leaned forward. "Go on." She unlocked her phone, her fingers trembling slightly, and handed it to him. On the screen was a text message, time-stamped the moment she had walked outside during her blind date. "Go outside. I'm watching." Ethan felt his pulse spike. This wasn't from your date. "No." Marin's voice cracked. "The real date messaged me an hour later, apologizing for missing dinner. He never sent that." June curled closer to her mother, confused but sensing the danger. Ethan placed the phone on the table, jaw tightening. "This guy didn't just follow you casually. He's controlling your movements." Before Marin could respond, Shadow jerked upright, muscles tight, ears pointed toward the back of the diner. A low growl vibrated through his chest. Ethan rose immediately. "What is it, boy?" Shadow trotted to the back door, sniffing with urgency, tail raised stiffly. Ethan looked at Marin. "Stay here. Lock the door behind me." Marla rushed over. "What's happening?" "Keep them safe," Ethan said, his voice low but firm. He pushed into the back hallway and stepped out into the snow-laden alley. The wind was sharper here, funneling between buildings. Shadow darted toward the dumpsters, nose to the ground. Ethan followed, boots crunching in rhythm behind the dog. Then Shadow stopped, barked once, and pawed at something near the back wall. Ethan knelt. There, barely visible unless someone was looking closely, a tiny pin camera was wedged behind a cracked cinder block. Its lens aimed precisely at the diner's rear door. A cold wave rolled through Ethan's spine. Someone had placed this intentionally. Someone had wanted to know where Marin went, even after she disappeared with her brother. Someone patient. Someone calculating. He pried the camera loose and turned it over. It was no toy. Good quality, waterproof casing, long-range transmitter. The kind used by people who like to stay hidden. The snow at his knees glowed faintly as the device's LED flashed. Shadow growled deeper, circling the dumpster, sniffing frantically. Ethan followed the direction the dog indicated and found a small, snow-dusted pouch hidden beneath a cardboard box. Inside were memory cards, each labeled by date. His pulse hammered. Whoever this stalker was, he hadn't followed Marin for one night. He had followed her for weeks. Ethan slipped the pouch into his jacket and hurried back inside. When Marin saw the small camera in his hand, her face drained of color. "That wasn't meant for me," Ethan said quietly. "It's pointed at the back door. It's meant to watch you." June trembled, pressing her face into her mother's coat. Marin swallowed hard. "So Aaron was right. He really has been watching me." Ethan nodded. "And he's not done." Shadow whined softly, as if urging Ethan to move faster. He placed the pouch on the table, opened it, and pulled out the memory cards, each containing pieces of a nightmare Marin never knew she was living. "We need to see what's on these," Ethan said. But before any of them could speak again, the diner lights flickered, once, twice, as if the storm itself were warning them. Inside the diner, the fluorescent lights hummed softly above them, casting pale reflections across the chrome fixtures and mutated red vinyl seats. Ethan spread the tiny pouch's contents, memory cards, timestamp labels, and the pin camera across the table as Marin held June close. Shadow sat pressed against Ethan's leg, tail curled around his feet, gaze alert and unblinking. The warmth inside the diner contrasted sharply with the storm beyond the windows, but it did nothing to ease the dread rising slowly through the room. Ethan slid one of the memory cards into Marla's old laptop, a bulky silver machine she reluctantly fetched from the back office. "I use it to handle payroll," she muttered, "but if it helps find whoever's doing this, you go ahead." The screen flickered to life. Grainy footage filled the display: snowy sidewalks, the convenience store entrance, the alley behind the diner. A timestamp at the bottom corner showed recordings spanning several days. Marin's breath hitched when her own face appeared. The camera had captured her leaving work, carrying groceries home, helping June with her backpack after school. Innocent moments stolen without permission. Then Ethan's jaw tightened as the next clip rolled. Himself carrying June out of the convenience store tonight. "That means he saw us," Ethan murmured. "But that wasn't the intention. We just happened to walk into his frame." Marin leaned closer. "So, he wasn't following you?" Ethan shook his head. "No, he's been following you." But something else caught his eye, a faint silhouette near the street lamp across multiple clips, always distant, always still. A tall figure wrapped in a heavy dark coat, hood drawn forward. The angle of his stance never changed much, as if he preferred to observe from afar, lurking on the edges of light. Marin swallowed hard. "That shape. I've seen someone like that near my apartment. I thought it was coincidence." Shadow suddenly lifted his head, sniffing sharply toward the diner door. Ethan rested a hand on the dog's back, feeling the tense muscles vibrate beneath the fur. Shadow's reaction was never random. Minutes later, 2 police officers arrived, summoned by Ethan's second call. The storm had eased enough for them to respond. The first officer, Detective Samuel Grayson, stepped inside with snow dusting his shoulders. Grayson was in his late 40s, with weathered tanned skin, deep-set brown eyes, and streaks of gray through his clipped black hair. His jawline was strong, but softened by exhaustion, an exhaustion that came from decades of chasing people who didn't want to be caught. Calm but observant, he carried himself like someone who had seen the worst of people, but still hoped they could do better. Behind him followed Officer Lena Hart, a younger woman in her early 30s, athletic build, blonde hair tightly braided, and sharp pale blue eyes that missed nothing. Her energy was sharper, quicker, a counterbalance to Grayson's steady gravity. She had a reputation for being relentless, a result of losing her sister to domestic stalking years earlier, a trauma that shaped her career into a crusade against men who followed women in the shadows. Ethan briefed them quickly. Grayson listened without interrupting, his eyes narrowing when he saw the camera and its neatly labeled memory cards. "This isn't some spur-of-the-moment obsession," he said. "This guy's methodical." Lena started running through the diner's back exit with Shadow. She crouched beside the dumpster, examining footprints and lingering scents. Ethan watched as she let Shadow sniff again before she traced the trail. "It's heading toward the old apartment blocks," she said, pointing southeast. "Whoever he is, he spent time there." Grayson turned to Marin. "You mentioned this man pretended to be your blind date?" Marin nodded shakily. "I blocked someone on the dating app months ago. He kept asking to meet. When I said no, he started messaging on other accounts. I stopped paying attention. I didn't think—" Grayson raised a hand gently. "You're not at fault. Men like this escalate quietly." Lena returned, brushing snow from her knees. "We need city footage." Grayson motioned Ethan over. "You said the stalker appeared in different locations over the past week. That means he crossed areas with traffic cameras. We can trace his movement." Ethan nodded. "Let's do it." Within minutes, the officers connected their tablet to a secure server. As they pulled up feeds across town, Ethan watched the screen with growing unease. In nearly every clip where Marin had been recorded by the stalker's camera, the same dark-coated figure appeared somewhere in the background, at a bus stop, leaning against a streetlight, stepping out from behind a building just as she passed. Grayson zoomed in on one frame showing the man's partial profile. Enough of his features emerged to make identification possible. Stubble on a narrow jaw, a sharp nose, sunken eyes, and a faint scar on the eyebrow. Details that meant something to Marin the moment she saw them. Her face paled. "That's—" she swallowed. "That's Caleb Dorsey." "Who is he?" Ethan asked. Marin exhaled shakily. "We dated for a few months before June was born. When he started showing controlling behavior, I ended things. He didn't take it well. After June came, he got worse, accusing me of hiding things, reading my private messages. I filed a report back then. He disappeared until now." Lena cursed softly. "This fits his pattern. Men like him spiral when they feel replaced or ignored." Grayson scanned the street outside. And tonight he realized someone else was helping her. That puts everyone in danger. The tablet chimed suddenly. Lena's eyes widened. "We've got something." Grayson angled the screen so Ethan could see above. Cell tower hit. Caleb Dorsey's phone just pinged, only a few blocks from here. Shadow rose on all fours, ears pricked, tail straight, as though he felt the danger grow nearer. The storm had cleared, but the hunt had just begun. The snow had settled into a soft hush by the time Detective Grayson and Officer Lena moved with purpose through the dimly lit streets, guided by the ping of Caleb Dorsey's phone. The storm clouds drifted apart, letting thin ribbons of moonlight spill onto the city blocks. Ethan, Marin, June, and Shadow remained inside Rosie's diner, tension coiling through the warm air as they waited. Even Shadow, usually composed, paced near the booth, nails tapping softly against the linoleum floor. Grayson's voice crackled through the diner's old landline, startling Marla, who nearly dropped her coffee pot. "We're close. Don't let anyone out." Minutes stretched painfully. June sat with her cheek pressed to her mother's shoulder, eyes drooping with exhaustion, though fear kept her from fully drifting asleep. Marin stroked her daughter's hair, but her own hands trembled slightly, not from cold, but from the adrenaline of the night finally settling in. Ethan watched the snow outside with a veteran's discipline, scanning the dark corners of the street, the rooftops, the alley mouth across the road. His instincts remained alive, trained not by paranoia, but by memory. He had known the kind of men who waited in shadows, convinced the world owed them something. Men who believed affection was a prize to take rather than a choice to be earned. Shadow suddenly stiffened, ears locked forward, body angled toward the exit. Ethan rose immediately. Before he could reach the door, a squad car's headlights swept across the windows. Another beam from behind illuminated drifting flakes. The hum of radios and crunch of boots on snow filled the air. Lena pushed open the door, a cold gust sweeping in behind her. "It's done," she said, breath visible in the warm diner light. "We got him." Marin let out a breath that collapsed her shoulders, relief flowing through her so quickly she had to grip the table to steady herself. June lifted her head, blinking. "Mommy?" Is he gone? Lena stepped into the diner fully, her expression softening from the hard professional edge she had worn all night. Yes, sweetheart. He can't hurt you or your mom. You're both safe now. She brushed snow from her uniform sleeve before adding, Your mom did everything right. And your brother? He sensed something wrong before anyone else did. Ethan noticed how deliberately Lena's voice avoided condemnation, how she recognized the delicate balance between trauma, guilt, and recovery. She treated Maren not as a victim, but as someone who had survived something frightening without losing her empathy. It reminded Ethan why officers like her held the line so fiercely. Grayson joined them moments later, tall frame dusted with snow. His face, lined but steady, softened when he saw June in Marin's arms. He didn't resist, Grayson reported. He was hiding near the laundromat 3 blocks down. Looked like he was deciding whether to come after you. Again. He paused. He had more photos on his phone, a lot more. This wasn't going to stop unless someone intervened. Marin's eyes shimmered, not from fear now, but from the weight lifting off her chest. Thank you, she whispered, but Grayson shook his head. Thank him, he said, nodding toward Ethan. He saw things most people would have ignored. His gaze dropped to the German shepherd sitting proudly beside Ethan. And the dog, too. He led us straight to the right block. Shadow barked once, tail thumping, as though accepting the compliment with military precision. Marla brought warm cocoa for June and hot coffee for the adults. Ethan sat back down, the adrenaline ebbing, replaced by an unexpected quiet, a moment of stillness that felt earned. Maren looked at him with gentle sincerity. If you hadn't stopped tonight, if you hadn't believed June, her voice cracked, I don't know what might have happened. Ethan shook his head. You don't owe me anything. Maren smiled, a small, tired but genuine smile. I owe you more than that. June, sipping cocoa from a red holiday mug, slid off the booth and tugged lightly on Ethan's sleeve. When he knelt to her height, she held his calloused hand between her small fingers. Sir, she said softly, can we have breakfast together tomorrow? For the first time all night, Ethan felt warmth bloom behind his ribs. Maren watched the exchange, eyes hopeful but cautious, like someone rediscovering the possibility of safety. He ruffled June's hair gently, his voice low but warm. Yeah, he said with a small smile. But this time, no blind dates, just breakfast. June's grin spread wide, brighter than the neon lights still buzzing above them. Shadow nudged Ethan's hand with his snout, as if seconding the idea. Grayson and Lena took their leave, promising follow-up reports and offering kind words before stepping back into the settling snow. Outside, the storm had ended. The city lay still, blanketed in clean white drifts that glittered under the pale early morning glow. A night filled with fear and pursuit finally exhaled into silence. Maren wrapped her coat around June and looked at Ethan. Maybe this is a new beginning, she said softly. Ethan nodded, opening the diner door for them, Shadow trotting proudly at his side. Maybe it is. As they stepped out into the peaceful aftermath of the storm, stars peeked faintly through thinning clouds, steady, bright, and sure. The kind of sky that promised that even the worst nights could give birth to gentler mornings. And in that quiet hour, as their footprints formed a single trail in the snow, what began as a cry for help became the first chapter of something that resembled a family, fragile, hopeful, and ready to grow. In the end, on that quiet winter morning, one truth remained. God still sends miracles, often through ordinary people. A veteran on a late-night errand, a little girl searching for her mother, a loyal dog following danger's scent. None of them met by accident. Sometimes, God guides our steps long before we know we're needed. Let this story remind you, kindness saves lives. Faith restores hope. and no one is ever truly alone. If this touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Comment below what miracle you're praying for today. And may God bless you and your family with protection, peace, and light through every storm.